Good morning. Good morning. You are listening and watching or tuning in or participating live on the Daily Huddle. My name is Sorel Kitan. My partner is Giovanni Gonzalez. Together, we co-founded the show. And you know what? For a year in 2020, March 2020 to maybe early 2021, Giovanni and I would get up every single morning and we'd have a conversation. People would participate, and many of you are still participating. And then something magical happened. We said to ourselves, this has been such a gift to us. What if we gave the gift away? And we started asking around for people who would find it in their heart to create the time to give of their talent, give of their heart, all for nothing other than making a difference for the people who are listening, making a difference for themselves. And it turned out that it was a trifecta of giving. For the people who said yes to hosting, had something to say that they couldn't shut up about anyway. So that was their gift. And that is their gift. And the people who listen always get something out of it. And then the world itself that gets blessed by virtue of being connected to the people who listen and the hosts make it all what the Daily Huddle is all about. We exist to create a new paradigm for being, for human being, and the expression of leadership in the world. And today is a very special day because another human being, his name is Keith Lisenbee, has said yes to being a host of the Daily Huddle. And so whenever Monday rolls around, tell yourself it is Mindset Monday, and Keith will be here with you, creating a conversation designed to leave you with a shot in the arm and a shot in the heart. If you own a business, if you are in a relationship, if you run a church, if you run a football team, it doesn't matter. You are in business with human beings. And it takes something to deal with human behavior, not to predict it, but to actually create an environment where you can harness it to build, create, expand, whatever it is you're up to. And Keith has said yes to that. Keith, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Daily Huddle as a host and invite you to say yourself inside of the context you created today called what is the 55-38-7 rule? Keith, welcome and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much again for another wonderful intro. I guess another check is in the mail to you for another great intro. Couldn't do it any better than that. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity. This is I think going to be a wonderful collaboration, a wonderful project, and I'm very much looking forward to this work here together. So
Yeah, awesome, awesome. No introduction of a host of the Daily Huddle would be complete without Giovanni popping in and saying something before you dive into today's question. Gio, would you please?
Sorel, you're the master of putting people in the spotlight. Like, why do you do that? I'm gonna have a conversation with you later about that. But however, thank you for including me, and I was looking forward to meet Keith in this context. And thank you, Keith, for being a yes and playing with us and being someone who is committed to providing value to folks in this way on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. And so I'm really looking forward to being with you, learning from you, and supporting you and being coached by you and everything else. Thank you for being here, Keith.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to be in this forum.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
Keith, it is all yours.
It is all mine. Thank you so much, everyone. So, as was discussed and brought up at the very open, the question of the day is, what is the 55-38-7 rule. So this, I want to say up front, is part of going to be a series that started back when I appeared on one of the Friday shows here on the Daily Huddle not too long ago, where the question of the day is what is intentional empathy? Now, as a reminder, if you didn't have the opportunity to watch, I encourage you to go back and watch that and listen to it to talk about intentional empathy and the basics of it. But this is an offshoot, and this program today and the programs that are preceding or not preceding that will come after today are designed to focus on intentional empathy, how to recognize it, how to do it, what are the foundations, and how do you actually show intentional empathy. But to review, the definition, just the working definition of intentional empathy, is the conscious and clear-minded attempt by you and by those around you to be empathetic towards others in order to build stronger collaborations and relationships in all aspects of your life. And it is the idea of doing things with purpose and consciously in order to get the results in that interaction that you are looking for. And it takes work and it takes a lot of practice. And we'll go through that in the series of episodes that we're going to have starting today. So, but we got to start from the basics of this. Why do we get to this idea called empathy in the first place? And a good place to start is this 55-38-7 rule. And so I'm going to ask this. When it actually matters more, what actually matters more? What you say, how you say it, or what your body and face are doing when you say it. Again, I'll repeat. What matters more? What really actually matters? What you say, how you say it, and what your body and face look like when you say it. Now, a couple of stories I want to kind of just to jump right in on that is we've all had some experiences, out in the world with people. For example, who out here who's listening has had the fun and or maybe misfortune of calling a customer service hotline and heard a voice on the other end. And sometimes that voice is pleasant and welcoming, and sometimes you probably got someone who maybe woke out of bed in another time zone. That has an effect on how they are perceived and how we perceive them just on, for example, their voice. Have you ever heard and asked someone at the office or at home, like, hey, what's going on? How you doing? And their answer is, I'm fine. But you look on their face and you see pouting, grimacing. Their body language is like this, their arms folded across their chest like this. What is that really saying? Are they really fine when you have them saying I'm fine? Their body language is like this, and their tone is really low. So what does that tell you? What are those cues are saying? So the idea here is what really matters most. Have you ever, y'all out there, have you ever felt like someone's tone said something different or their face said something different than what they actually said? That's what I'm talking about, those experiences. So again, what part really matters in the whole scheme of things? So first we got to talk about voice. Voice is one of my favorite things to talk about because it is one of the three that matter. The three that matter is going to be voice, what you say, and body language. So, but I love starting off with voice. Now, voice, I'm talking about how you're speaking, what the sound of your voice is. It is incredibly powerful. And when we look at voice, we look at the speed, how fast someone is talking, what their tone is. Like, is it a soft tone? Is it a loud tone? And for example, if someone is using sarcasm, they have a certain tone of voice that goes with that. If they are using warmth, there's another. So to kind of illustrate this, how powerful voice is uh, uh, actually, my wife and I yesterday were calling said customer support for an unnamed company I will not mention, for protecting the innocent and the guilty at the same time. And we called twice. One time we got someone on the line whose voice was very warm, very welcoming, very happy voice. It was like very willing and wanting to help with their voice. Again, when you're on a phone call, all you hear is their voice, right? And so they were very welcoming and warm and happy sounding. And so we felt pretty good about that. But we had to call back. So we called back. And we got a person on the line that, suffice to say, sounded like someone that, as I mentioned earlier, sounded like they just woke up 4 or 5 or 10 time zones away. Their voice was like, yeah, yeah, so I can help with that. Yeah, it's all right. Now, that gave us a whole different feel, doesn't it give you that different feel too when you hear a voice on the line like that versus a voice that's warm and welcoming and happy sounding? That's the power of voice. We can change people's emotions literally by the sound of our voice. The happier or even sometimes the deeper, the better. But when it's slurred or slow or really too fast or pressured, that's another. So I think everyone kind of has those types of experiences. Body language is also very important. And also, I want to mention that we're in this Zoom age and we're on live with people, sitting in their offices or homes, and we're talking right now, all of us together. And what is the one thing body language wise that we generally do not see on like a Zoom call like this? Your hands. Your hands. Now, evolutionary speaking, your hands, for example, is one of the most important things to show another person, to show them that you're safe. You're not a threat. You're welcoming. Open hands. Your hands are open and so forth, and you hold your hand out to shake. Your hands are open. That shows you're a safe person to be around. We don't see that, for example, in Zoom meetings. We don't see people's hands. So just something to think about. But body language is about your body posture. How are you standing? Are you in an open stance or a confident victory stance? Or are you closed off like this? Do you have too much or too little space between your shoulders and your ears, meaning you're in a closed body position? That shows like a lack of confidence and it changes your voice. Are you like this? Are your arms closed and leaning back in a closed body posture? These are all the things. How many of you out there have watched a TED Talk? Can you tell me in the TED Talk, what were the body language cues you saw from the TED Talk that made you just jump for joy, enthusiastic, and make you want to listen?
For me, it's especially if they're standing, Keith, hands to the side, relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not pacing too fast, but they're not standing still.
Right.
And they're using their hands to emphasize specific segments of what they're saying.
Right. Exactly. So thank you for that answer. It's an awesome answer. Yes, the ones that they have shown that have the most views on the TED Talks on YouTube and so forth are people who are with their body language. They're in an open body posture, showing that they're open to everyone. They're like this. They're moving their hands and gesturing. They're emphasizing what they're saying with their hands. They have their hands open. They're not clenched or too close to them, as you mentioned. And no, they're not moving around as if they're frantic, because people, again, all of these body language cues affect us even consciously and unconsciously. And so we have to be so mindful of that. If someone's frantically on stage, just pacing and pacing and pacing, then that gives another message that, and it causes people to move away. But that open, and I know someone in the chat just mentioned also voice combined with body language in those talks. They have a lot of energy. They have a lot of energy. They're constantly, a lot of, and their voice is not really slow and methodically boring at the same time, right? So it
I'm
goes hand in
curious
hand.
about something.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the 55-38-7 rule, and I'm
Mhm.
guessing it has something to do with the three things you mentioned:
Yeah.
voice, people say, and body language.
Mhm.
Where does the 55-38-7 rule come into play? And how do I and others as business owners uh, pay attention to it, use it, heed it?
Well, the reveal is that the idea, that old thing that we were taught when we were younger, that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's where the 55-38-7 rule comes in play. So that those numbers represent the percentages of the influence and power of body language, voice, and what you say in an emotional or uh, a attitude type of conversation. Any emotional conversation, a deep conversation, a personal conversation with someone, those are the primary three factors, and those are the percentages of influence on each three. So 55 is body language. Okay, so how you're sitting, how you're standing, what are you doing with your hands, your eye contact. Also, you want to make 60% example of something to do. 60% of the time when you're interacting with someone, you should make eye contact. That's just enough, but not too much, not too little. For example, you want to be in an open body position, hands. You want to show your hands, but in an open position. For example, the 38 represents the voice. Like I mentioned earlier, voice affects mood. A voice can trigger someone's emotions just by the voice. I mean, everyone probably on here has probably heard Morgan Freeman speak. How soothing, calming is that? Some of you probably listen to a meditation. How soothing and warm is that? It really affects. And in our conversation with people, when we modulate our voice and slow ourselves down, get a little bit deeper sometimes, or lighten up, depending on what kind of energy one want to bring, we can modulate our voice to do that. That's the 38%. The 7% is exactly what we say.
Now, is there a chicken and egg kind of thing going on between that? Can you fake? Can you fake the voice if someone's not seeing your body language?
Yeah.
Let's say you're on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a voice that actually does it? Or is it impossible for human beings to fake it from a behavioral standpoint?
I would never suggest anyone to try to fake it. Okay, because people will see right through that. Okay, the person that comes to mind is remember Elizabeth Holmes? She was the woman who's now in prison for fraud because she ran the Thanos company and she was indicted and in prison for fraud. Her hero was Steve Jobs. And in her conversations and interviews, she tried to fake her voice to sound more like Steve Jobs. So she tried to fake a deeper voice, and people thought it was weird, off-putting, confusing, and fake. And that that happens, you lose credibility. So I
So
would not suggest you fake your voice. You can
yeah,
change your voice. You can change how fast you talk, right? How quickly you talk. And as you can probably tell in this conversation, I've sped up and slowed down depending on what I wanted to emphasize and what I didn't. For example, you can move your octave down or an octave up. Okay, that and still remain in a natural tone of voice. You can modulate, but fake it, no, I wouldn't ever suggest that.
yeah. Let's say you're doing all that and no one is seeing your body language. You're on the phone.
Mm-hmm,
If you're in a bad position, could
mm-hmm.
you even do the voice? I'm looking to see if there's an interconnection between them from a
Yes.
behavioral standpoint.
Yes, there. So if I hear the question, if I heard your question correctly, is it that can you, with your body language, even if no one can see it, could you, in your body language, depending on how you're sitting or standing, change your voice without even meaning to? The answer is yes, you can.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So in the example I mentioned earlier of someone, if they're sitting really close up like this and they're like this, that will change their voice. Okay, just enough to sound not very confident. So yes, you can do that. So if you open your body up in the chair, if you're on the phone, or if you're standing in a more open body posture or a victory, what I call a victory body posture, um, then your voice is opened up, your lungs are opened up, and you can use your voice a lot better.
And what does that all mean for us business owners? And
What that means is in the analogy I always or the idea I always use is I can tell you really good news and I can tell you really bad news. And depending on how I stand, how I'm sitting, how fast I do it, my tone of voice, I can change how and affect very deeply in a positive way and in a very negative way how you receive that.
mm,
Okay. If I tell you, hey, I got some really bad news, that's going to be received one way. If I say, hey, I got some really bad news, that's going to have another emotional resonance. And the impact on the listener can be very profound. I would say the first way was more calming and soothing and relaxing. And the first way was more frantic. You want to hear bad news from someone who's talking to you in a frantic way? That's I don't know about you out there, but that would make me a little like, oof, what's going to happen here? If someone comes to me with a calm voice and says, hey, I got some bad news, I'm going to feel more relaxed.
so, regardless of what one does, marketing wise or
Mm-hmm.
sales wise, you could make or break a deal based on how you speak,
Mm-hmm. Yes, I
based
mean,
on your body language.
absolutely. You can break a deal really easily. I mean, I'm sure all of you probably out there have watched Shark Tank, right? It's a show where these folks are trying to pitch to investors their business and what they're doing. I will guarantee you, and studies have been done on this actually. They have shown that those in people that are trying to pitch their business to the sharks, who had more open body postures, whose voice was more empathetic sounding, and I saw something in the chat about empathy and if you sound more empathetic by your voice, if it's a little bit calmer and deeper, for example, those people looking for investors who were more successful for the ones who didn't shoot themselves down because their body language was poor or their eye contact was miserable, or they set off these cues to the sharks that they didn't have any confidence. And the sharks didn't have confidence either. The dude that created Ring, for example, he
Mm-hmm.
went on Shark Tank. That's a big, huge, massive business. But you know what? The sharks didn't invest. Why? Because his body language was poor. His voice sounded not confident, and he destroyed any deal within 2 minutes.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went on to make that company. I don't know how big that company is now, but it seems like everyone's got a ring, got a ring on their door or something like that. But it just shows that he had a great idea, awesome idea, a winning idea, but he presented it poorly.
So the last question I have that I'm wondering about, Keith, is the way I think, a mindset. Like maybe I woke up this morning and I'm concerned, worried about something. Does that have a severe impact on the three: body language, voice, and what I
Mhm.
say?
Great
What's the
question.
connection?
Yeah, absolutely great question. We wake up and we're feeling anxious and we're feeling, sad or emotional or angry or irritable, any of those things. That's going to show you in a lot of the cues, those body language cues, voice cues. People will see it and people can hear it in our voice pretty easily. We're very, very in tune to body language and voice, given that 55 and 38. That's 93% total. Okay.
Mm.
People see it, and we're going to carry ourselves a certain way when we're feeling anxious. We're going to talk a certain way when we're anxious as well. So usually anxious people are fidgety. They're fidgeting with their hands, which then causes other people, when they see that, it signals to them, oh, this person's fidgety, they're nervous, then they get nervous. That may not be the best way to start a business deal conversation. You don't want your customer to be nervous. When you're nervous, if you're fidgeting your hands like this, or you're shifting in your seat, moving around, again, that makes people, they see that. You haven't even said anything yet. You see that and they're already frantic, you know, and they're picking up on it and they're like, oh, maybe they're not confident. Maybe they're not ready to make this deal. They're hesitant. That may not even have to do with anything. May have just gotten wrong, you know, got stuck in traffic for 3 hours before coming to the meeting, like, but people will see that and go from there. It will also, people are anxious in their voice, they get squeaky in their voice. Yeah, yeah, okay, that's fine. Sure, we can do that, and people are like, when they hear that tone and they hear those words kind of not, that has an effect too. Like, ooh, okay, what's going on with this person? You know? So yeah, and that can kill deals instantaneously. And these cues are very subtle, and some of them are not so subtle, but you can have all the good data, have all the good content, but the delivery, is the key.
And when it comes to delivery like that, given how important it is, 93%,
93.
what do you recommend for people who want to elevate the way they communicate?
Uh, I mean, have a coach in a sense, and then you can have a formal coach, or you can pick a friend, your spouse, your significant other, someone close to you, a mentor, and have them kind of give you feedback on your body language and how you talk, you know, and that, I think, for me, I know has been very beneficial when I've gotten feedback about my body language and my voice and things like that, because I'll be told, like, okay, your body language was this and that signified this to me. Your voice sounded this way. And it sounded, it signified this. It was a cue. Have someone really give you some honest, transparent feedback around, you know, how you're sitting, how you're standing, how close to the camera are you, all those things, or how your voice sounds. Is it someone, do you sound empathetic? Do you sound like you're listening? Or do you sound aggravated, agitated, irritable? You know, let someone in and let them observe you, even record you, and give you feedback. When I was running or was supervising a crisis hotline, I would listen to calls all the time, and I can tell instantaneously the staff that were feeling pretty good, feeling very confident, and really sounded empathetic versus the ones that not. And I would sit them down and say, "Can you listen to yourself here? What does that sound like to you?" So that would be the number one thing that I would do. And then whatever feedback you get, practice, 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 practice.
Well, Keith, times runs really
Yeah.
fast on the Daily Huddle. It's
Yes, it does. Yes,
9:01.
it does.
So, given that this is a series,
Hmm.
how do you want to tee up the next episode in the series? And what do you want to leave people with for this particular episode?
Absolutely. So we can talk about intentional empathy and how to be intentionally empathetic without talking about emotions and without talking about, feelings and how we feel things and why we feel things. Because this being the lead up was people's body language, people's voice, and what they say affects how we feel, affects our emotions, affects the emotions of the person that we are talking to and talking with. Now, why is that important? Because of how emotions are made. Yes. So our brain is really, really good at creating emotions for us. So I want to talk about next time, how does that work? And how does things like voice and body language fit in to how emotions are made?
That'll be perfect. Gio and I are fond of saying, you are responsible for your relationship with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you're responsible for the way what you say lands over there.
Exactly.
This episode
Perfect.
points to something like a required practice, like to
Mm-hmm.
practice listening to myself, to practice watching myself, to get coached and get observed on how 93% of what I'm not saying is communicating to
Right.
others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for bringing that to the party, Keith. Folks, we'll end today, as we always do, with our 8 tenets. The first one is love. Now, I'm thinking about it, Keith. I could say, yeah, I love you. Or I could say, I love you, you know? And I don't know which one landed which way, but I get to practice that way, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
love, stress less, eat mostly plant based, sleep, give, rest, exercise, move your body. And last but not least, check your assumptions. Just when you think you know the truth, maybe you don't. This is our daily huddle for today. We're on every day, and Keith will be back with you next Monday to take you into the brain and how the brain works to create emotions, because those emotions actually drive how you can be intentionally empathetic. Until then, folks, we'll see you tomorrow morning right here on the Daily Huddle.